En pils?
Ikke med kortet mitt. Pluss.
Jeg kan ligge ut for en pils for deg, liksom.
Eksamen skal inn!
Etter dette?
Det greit å bli.
Ja, se der! Yes! I told her we're going for a beer afterwards. One beer, I said. And she okay, I'll stay. You do that.
And we're back. Welcome to another episode of this podcast where everything is up for discussion. Why am I speaking English, you might ask? Well, there's a bunch of good reasons for that. We're only 2 days away from the midterm elections, which I'm told is very exciting. And the true reason why we're turning this podcast upside down by speaking a completely different language, excuse me, is because we have a real American in the studio with us. Welcome, Madelaine.
Hi.
Hello. Real one. And the good old gang is still here. Hangover Christian.
Hello, guys.
Hello. Curious Malin.
Hello.
And always ready to debate Andre.
Yes.
You guys don't have a nickname for me? No, okay.
Not yet.
I'll move on.
For next time.
Okay. Seriously though. I have a good feeling about this episode. This is a very smooth transition into today's topic. Because Madelaine is here to make sense of what is happening in America.
I'll do my best.
You come from a very polarized country. That's what we're talking about today.
Ooh.
Political polarization. So what's going on in your country, Madelaine?
I mean, there's a lot of things going on in America, I think. But yeah, there is definitely, like, every year, politics are getting a bit more polarized, I would say, just like that Republicans feel like they can't trust Democrats and Democrats feel like they can't trust Republicans, and then nothing is getting done because nobody wants to compromise with one another.
Would you trust a Republican?
On some issues, yeah.
Would you, if I told you I was a Republican, would you trust me as a person?
Yeah.
Okay.
Why not? Why
not?
shouldn't she?
I don't know. Isn't that part of the polarization in America,
Absolutely.
You have people like so at each other's throats that you can't really talk to the other person. You can't make compromises, and this is basically the definition of polarization. Like you so against what another person stand for, you can't stand the person.
Yeah, but that's what we were talking about with the safe space thing, which is not really a thing in Norway, but it's probably it's probably coming. But we don't have many minorities. It's like we don't have many minorities in Norway, so the thing is kind of slow.
We don't have much of a victim culture in Norway.
Sure, that also. What is victim culture?
Is
Andre?
that why I didn't want to have him in the podcast? This is by the way, she's not in the podcast today.
Well, yeah, Håkon.
Yeah, what is a victim culture?
Well, I would say it's the culture that's in the United States and part of Western Europe where the way you can win a discussion is by making yourself the biggest victim. And I think that's a recurring issue, especially in the United States as of now.
Oh, sorry, I got a question here that I just want to throw out. So I read and I heard a lot about lately microaggressions, which I don't find it understandable how every slight against you is either racist or sexist, because it's so hard to differentiate between the two. Like if I jump the line in front, if I jump the line, let's say at the supermarket, is that a microaggression or am I just being an asshole?
I mean, I think that like it is very contextual and it depends on the action in relation to the people involved and whatnot. But I think microaggressions are very real and something you can't really understand unless you are a minority or you are feeling those things, because there's a lot of things that like men wouldn't understand because they've just never experienced life as a woman. But that I know sometimes like as a woman or because I look young or regardless, like people will do certain things to not take me seriously. And so even though it may not, if the same action was done to a different person, like it would have different meaning. But because of the context, like it just, that's kind of what changes it.
I have to just say something about that because I just recently saw a movie or like a thing from the Daily TV show where there was this thing about white women in the United States, where one example was that she was in a store and there was this 9-year-old boy that was black, and she accused him for sexual harass her and grab her butt.
I
And
saw
then
that
she
one,
called,
actually.
yeah, and then she called
Yeah.
called the police and like, the cops come here and like a 9-year-old boy come and grab my ass. And then they show like video clips where it actually was just his backpack.
He had his back.
Yeah,
turned
his
Yeah.
backpack
as well,
brushed
so-
against her ass or
yeah,
something.
and that is like
Wow.
microaggression on
Poor child
another
was
level,
traumatized.
but still it happens. And it's like, what the fuck? Why are people acting out like that on a kid? And
Oh, that's
and no, and it was so funny. Like the 3 or 4 days after, when they found out that it wasn't true, people in the store were like yelling at her. Like
She actually apologized, didn't she? I think she made a video or something.
No, to be honest,
But I don't. Do you think she learned?
no. It doesn't seem like it, because either way, if you are in that kind of a position where you actually want to call the police on a 9-year-old boy, and also because he's
Good
black,
point.
it just made it worse. And you can't even sense if someone is just like your back or someone's back package is like on your body, and someone grabbing you is a huge difference. So you just have to ask if she does it out of that, but not it's macro aggression in a way, if I can call it that. But is that something that is happening a lot in the US?
I mean, I think that it's hard to say if like these things have always happened and we're just hearing about them more, or if people are starting to like act out more in relation to whatever that may be, like the political atmosphere or just like people feeling like things getting posted more. I don't know, but I do feel like I'm hearing about stuff like that more.
Yeah.
I was just talking yesterday about that. If you saw that video of the woman who just called the police on like a black family who was having a barbecue at a park, and it was
No,
like
I haven't.
it was a while ago, so I don't remember all the details, but basically they were just having a barbecue in a park, and then she was like, you can't barbecue here or something, and just was trying to say it was against the rules of the park or something, and then she called the police, and there's this whole video, and then people are making fun of her because she's just so ridiculous.
Yeah, because it's the same victimized thing about it. They want to make themselves a victim of something that is nothing to make yourself a victim about, and make it such a huge thing, and also get so much publicity every
I think-
time it happens.
I think that's one of the problems with the polarizing culture that's going on
Yeah.
right now. That it's become a contest of who can make themselves the biggest victim.
Yeah.
So isn't that some sort of running joke among certain aspect of our culture now, that you have really offended Americans and they will find any reason to make themselves a victim? So I'm a woman. I'm like 1/16 Native American, so I'm also a minority. Like not to go after Elizabeth Warren, but
But
I mean she's basically the whitest person in Congress.
I mean, that's definitely up for debate, but she is white.
Yeah, but it's the part where you go out of your way to find a reason to make yourself a victim. It's like, oh, I'm being slighted for this, I'm being attacked for that, and without, I don't know. Like, I feel like if you go looking for trouble, you're gonna find it, no matter what you do in life. So if you yeah, but that's true though. If you want to be slighted, you're always gonna find something that you can look at as like an attack on you. So that's why I was used to like cutting in line. It could be 1,000 reasons because that. So it's really hard to determine whether or not that is racist, sexist, or just that person being. And also, so that is what I'm trying to do. It's really hard to distinguish it. It's really hard to pinpoint on one specific case of microaggression. And then, so that's my point. Is it? How can I say this? Do you feel like it's getting too? How can I say? It's getting too far when it comes to this in America. Do you wish you can dial it back a bit, or do you think that it hasn't gone too far?
I think it's very hard for me to answer that question because, like, even though I am a woman, I'm white, and I haven't really dealt with a lot of, like, oppression in my own life, and so it's hard for me to say how anybody should feel or that, like, their feelings aren't justified because I haven't felt what they feel. So at the same time that I think there often isn't a lot of room for discussion in the United States, like, you have to tiptoe around a lot of conversations, and that's something I don't particularly like, that sometimes it goes from a place where I feel like I can't get educated because I'm too afraid to ask questions that might be offensive. But in terms of people, like, being, like, playing victim or whatever, I'm always really hesitant to say that like they're not the victim of anything, if that makes sense.
Would you say I could always shut you down just by saying, "Oh, you're a white kid from the suburbs. You don't know anything about what you're talking about"? Do you feel like that's sort of the argument?
I think that can happen sometimes. Like people will just not want to explain themselves, and so then they'll just be like, "Well, you could never understand," and then that's kind of a problem. But I don't necessarily think that like conversations about microaggressions or things like that is a problem.
Sorry, I don't mean to just jump into the conversation every time, but I have a question. Isn't like what you guys are talking about, isn't it called identity politics? And it's all about how different groups want to promote their what they want in the society because they feel like there's such a big diversity in the country that it has to be addressed and there should be something in the politics about it. Isn't it?
Yeah, no, definitely. I haven't done like an extensive amount of research on that topic, but I think from what you just said and from what I do know that is like a huge thing in the United States. And I think it's also important that a lot of like that's something I try to explain to people when they ask about the United States is that there's not really an easy way to define our country. And I think a lot of the problems come from the fact that there are so many different groups who all want their needs met. And that's kind of a big reason why I think political polarization is actually such a bad thing to exist, because the only way we're ever going to have like any sort of stable political system is if we either separate into different countries or we find compromise. And so no one is really able to compromise with one another, even though there's all these different groups with different interests that need to be met.
Yeah, and so I'm going to switch space with Christian.
I'm gonna voluntarily give up my space to Dorsa.
You ruined my podcast.
Håkon, he just came in and he's like, Dorsa, you're not allowed to join this podcast. I'm like, sorry.
Oh
Okay,
God,
so I've
not
been
a
reading...
minority.
The minority, they always want to talk. But anyway, so what I read is that how the different parties, like the Republicans and Democrats, they are, before they used to be more similar to each other, and the people who used to vote would be like kind of agreeing on in both parties, but lately you can see these huge differences between the people who vote for different parties and how one party believes that the other one is a threat to nation security, and how that is the scary part. And it seems like those who are actually voting are those who are like either like extremely to the right or extremely to the left, but those in the middle, they don't really bother to vote because they're not really agreeing on what's going on. And
yeah, well, I think why I often see people that are extreme in the media is because it's interesting for the media to write about them.
Totally
I
agree
think,
on that
yeah.
one. You don't hear about us in the middle, or us in the middle, the people in the middle.
What? You're in the middle?
People
Wow.
in the middle that like they agree on something and disagree on something that will like don't have a clear stand, because as Håkon said, it's more like you get more publicity if you point out those who are more extreme than others, and that's why also I think that's essential when it comes to a polarized society, which we can see here as well, and you can see it in the United States, where you can use social media and the media as a super important role on how to make other things think how the society is.
The problem with social media, though, is that it creates an echo chamber. You can decide what you want to hear, and you can just exclude everything that you don't.
Especially with cookies.
Sure.
No, like internet
sure,
cookies.
Wow, those devices and
sure,
cookies.
if you like those cookies.
No, but if you search a lot for a certain subject on the internet, then most of the things that will appear in as ads
Yeah,
on your computer will be reflecting of what you've searched for.
Yeah.
So like you said, it will be an echo chamber where people who are right-wing oriented or left-wing oriented are only faced with things
And
strengthening their view.
Yeah.
Yep.
And if you go on Facebook and you get an ad, you can actually click and look at why you get exactly that
Yeah.
ad, and it says why. It's
And
like,
you can press like, never want to see this again, and
Yeah.
nothing from these people. Back to political polarization.
Well, something I was thinking about a little bit is just the fact that also, if you think about the people who are most likely to vote as well, it's not even just that, like, or the reason I think that on each side, people who are like most have the strongest opinions vote are also because a lot of the reason that you vote is because you're really passionate about what you're voting for. So people in the middle usually don't see a point. And the irony that I see in that is just the fact that a lot of times when people don't vote, they still get really upset about everything that's happening to them. And then I just get really upset because I'm like, you have the power to change this, but you just don't.
But it seems like, as I understood, it's like people decided to, like, people felt like they couldn't vote for either Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. How is that they felt like is there not any other party they could have voted on? Were they the only one they could vote?
Realistically, they're the only ones who had a chance of winning, and so it's kind of seen as like throwing away your vote if you vote third party, because our political system just kind of makes it impossible for a third
remember
party
during
to win.
the 2016 election, there was a lot of talk about people that don't dare to say that they vote for Trump. So all the polls were wrong because no one was actually daring to say, well, I'm going to vote for Trump. No,
We don't really talk about that.
yeah.
But can I just ask? Because when we had a lecture now last week with Hilda, she was talking about how important religion is and that it has changed somehow the last 2 years or something, that more people actually see, like, it's not a positive thing, but people can more accept that people don't believe in religion the same way. And that's why I'm just going to ask you, because I don't know much about this, but do you see somehow a certain change in the younger generation when it comes to voting, when it comes to what their causes of voting is?
Before you answer, and you can get to think a little bit about your answer, who is Hilda?
Hilda Resta
Yeah,
is our
who's that?
teacher.
She just threw that name out there.
I think everyone knows, that's our teacher.
This is a shout out to Hilda. She's a very good teacher at our school.
I think
That is
she's,
like super expert
the
on the
America expert for NRK.
Yeah. Sorry, Hilda, if you're listening to this.
What was your question?
Yeah, please answer.
I think you have to say it again.
What?
The question.
Yes. The question was like, has the younger generation in the US changed, and maybe like the causes of why they're voting are different than maybe before? Or do you see like a very polarized situation when it comes to like people in our age?
Like, are you asking if the younger generation votes differently than the older
Do you
generations?
see a
or
change
Do you see
with millennials?
Yeah. Like
Sort of.
like, have millennials evolved in
Do you-
how they're...
Yeah, do you think millennials are, on a whole, going towards a left-leaning ideology or right-leaning ideology?
Oh no, I think I know, because you were talking about religion. So do you want to say that are they less conservative?
Yeah, because when you saw that Bernie Sanders got a lot of votes and he is like a socialist, which is different than what we used to see. That's why I'm asking, do you think when he got into politics and was like a more visible person that you can actually vote for, do you think that somehow made people more aware of the options, and that religion maybe is a huge reason why there is a polarized election and views on different stuff or
Okay.
whatever cases or what I can say?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to like figure out how to answer this, but I think young people definitely more so are left-leaning, and they did definitely connect to Bernie Sanders, and so a lot of the polarization I think that you see is more between younger generations and older generations, because I looked at like voting results for I think like 18 to 26-year-olds or something like that, and Hillary would have won like in a landslide if it was just them voting. So you can see that it's very left-leaning in terms of younger people. And I think also just every generation has definitely been a little bit more, or I think Trump's election definitely woke people up a little bit because everyone was just assuming he wasn't going to win. So when he did, I think we'll see what happens in the midterms, but I think it's showing people that your vote means a little bit more than they thought it did in the past.
That's true.
Well, I have an open question for all of you. When this victimization culture is used to shut down talk or speech or debate, do you think that is dangerous for democracy?
Of course.
Why?
Because the freedom of speech is something that is essential to have a democracy. Regardless of who is talking and what they are saying, it's so important to have the voice there, but it should it should be seen with different views, especially if Trump has this way of speaking that is very good in his rhetoric. Like the way he speaks, the words he's using is always so huge. So I think
So huge.
yeah, they are like
He uses very bombastic language.
yeah, because that's why he actually also gets people to vote on him. The way he talks is like, I don't want to say it out loud, but it's like in the same way as Hitler does, and it scares the shit out of me that he's so good at speaking. And all the people.
Save the Hitler
Oh,
comparison.
no,
we gotta
but
save
it's just-
you
Hitler
just
for
end
when
the
true Hitler
conversation.
comes.
if you
Maybe it's
see,
the true Hitler.
but if you see
He's
all,
hiding it well then.
all the time when it has been some kind of a war or something bad happens, it is when someone that is that good at speaking actually also is the one who's leading the country.
Obama was better at speaking.
Different ways of speaking, using different
Like-
kind of words.
And
Yeah,
Yes.
And it's
one of them
shifting the
uses
language.
words.
and how
I'm
can
not.
I-
I'm not
don't
defending
understand all
what
the time.
Trump says,
No,
but
no,
I'm
but-
defending that he shouldn't be called Hitler.
I'm not
Because
saying
Hitler-
him
we
Hitler.
use the word-
I'm saying that he's using the same language and saying the same words and trying to.
That sounds like you're calling him Hitler. To me,
But I think I
He has
understand
the
what
same
you
rhetoric. He's the same way of
I
speaking.
get what you're seeing. He uses rhetoric around.
mean. He uses anger.
and victimize.
He plays
people
on anger,
and-
absolutely, like all identity politicians. They play on anger of people to get people to follow them. And Trump managed very successfully to appeal to a minority of evangelical white Christians in the United States who were overwhelmingly who voted for him. So back to the religious question. How important is it?
You've been awake in the
No,
classroom.
but that's very true because, and also I think that's why the younger generation maybe votes different than the older one.
I think
because
there's
of the religion perspective
less
on this.
religion amongst young people now. I
Yes.
think
Yeah.
the millennial generation is more predominantly atheist than anything else.
Maybe they don't want to say it, but maybe they don't have that
It might be
strong
an element of
relationship.
that, but I also think it's genuine.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Actually, I'm curious because in Norway it's quite normal to say that you're atheist. You don't really believe in a god. Is that normal in the States?
Yeah.
It is. All right.
Well, depends probably about where in the
Oh,
States.
yeah. Yeah.
I'm
I
sure
live
if
in a
you
very
said
liberal
so
part
in-
of the United States.
Yeah.
And
If you
it's
said
very
so in
normal.
Texas or I don't know, Arizona or
That,
something.
that
Maybe-
reminds me of something we talked about on Friday, where I said that the South is the real America, and they all got offended by it.
He's asking where to visit in the U.S. I just want to see the real America. I want to go to the South. And I'm like, I don't recommend.
You're a troll.
Where is the real America?
Well, that's what I was trying to say before. Like, there isn't real America because anyway, like, there's so many different sections.
Yeah.
Like most states you go to, and it's like visiting a different country. Kind of like, I don't.
Just
That's how I feel.
let me rephrase the question. What's the real America to you, for you?
I mean, the real America would probably just be like Washington and Oregon for me, like the West Coast, because that's where I'm from. So that's how I've experienced America. But I think, I don't know. It's like,
That's fair enough, though.
yeah.
I think.
Like the whole country, it's a way too big country to actually feel like the whole country is part of you and you're part of the whole country. It's
Yeah.
not like in Norway where everyone can say they're like, oh, I feel Norway. Even like people from northern Norway, they had a hard time being integrated into the country because people didn't even want them here.
Well, and they're
It even
struggling.
was like today, one of the politicians from like the right wing said today, I don't know if you guys have seen it. It's been everywhere in the media. Now I'm gonna go from the U.S. Politics. I'm sorry, I just have to say, because she actually wrote when one of the highest, I don't know, in like one of the parties that she was gonna be in the comedy of the National Day, and she is not from Norway. So she actually said as well that it should be especially someone from Oslo, from Norway, to be chronicle Norwegian.
The person that was elected was a person of Indian descent? Or-
Yeah,
she
was from
also-
outside of
She
Norway.
She
at least.
managed to as well
And-
be a racist to her, and also people from Norway
Yeah.
that isn't from Oslo. And I was like, what the fuck? I'm not Norwegian anymore because of that. And I was like, yeah.
If you're supposed to lead the committee, you have to be from Oslo.
God, Malin, you're such a victim.
Yeah, now I'm a victim. No, but that was kind of shocking, and that's just here, you know. So
She's 77 years old, though.
yeah, that's
Oh,
my
really?
just what I said. I think
You should never. You should never try to change an old person's mind, aka Donald Trump, 80 years old.
Yeah, their minds crystallized.
No, that
Okay.
is too far. I'm just joking. That
Was
was
a
I was
joke from
comparing
me.
it to
Even-
Hitler. I'm not better. I'm sorry. But okay, you're like, how has Donald Trump affected the U.S. police? Like, it's a big question. I know that, but you living like in the West Coast,
Yeah.
has that had any affection on people there and how they speak or how they behave or what they're thinking of the U.S.?
I mean, I think the biggest thing that has happened is that, well, first of all, it's a reminder of how big the United States is
Yeah.
because most of the people I know didn't vote for him. And so just realizing, like, that these people exist who agree with him and have all of those opinions, because I've always known that, like, there were Republicans, obviously, even though I grew up around, like, a lot of Democrats. But I didn't really know that there were that many people who agreed with him on, like, because he just has such strong things and, like, offensive things to say. So I think the biggest thing is just that I feel surprising, at least more so probably even, like, just for white people to realize, like, how many white people are really that racist.
Yeah.
Where I think a lot of people of color are kind of saying, like, we've known that people were this bad and, like, welcome.
Welcome
Now
to
you
the
know.
real world.
Yeah.
Actually, that's so true because especially people outside America, they when they think about the United States, they think about the people in the Hollywood movies, and especially those like more liberal people like in New York and Los Angeles, and that's how they expect the country to be like. And I was also quite surprised when I heard about like, oh, Donald Trump is voted. I'm like, what happened? Like 8 years ago it was Barack Obama, now it's Donald Trump. What just happened?
Do you guys think the United States is more or less racist today than 50 years ago?
50 years ago, it's
I mean, less.
Yeah.
Or at least less openly racist.
I'm glad you said so.
The thing is that because I'm not from I'm not from the United States and I've never been there before, I was surprised about the debate on racism. I didn't know that. Like for me, I don't know what you guys think, but for me, the debate on racism in the United States, I think it's old news. Get over it. Like, you know what racism is. Do something about it. And I was just surprised on how they're still talking about it as if it's something they cannot solve. While like in my opinion, it's obvious you shouldn't discriminate. The system should change some stuff just so that you would be like there would be more equality. Does people understand what I'm saying?
No.
And okay, so
I
there's
have
this
no idea.
there's this documentary on how, for example, Black Americans have a hard time getting back on their feet because of their history, and it's amazing to see that because there's like so hard to change the laws in America, there's still a form for racism going in the
Constitution.
Institutional racism.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what you're talking about.
That's
okay.
what I'm. Oh, that was a far away. We should cut that part out. I don't know. Is it true or is it just me? I was really surprised that there was a huge debate on racism in the United States.
Like,
But
I think they would learn from
no
their
no one's
history.
denying racism in the United States.
well, a lot of people are.
Yeah.
No,
that's
no.
What's going on
What
with
they're
white
denying,
supremacy.
what they're denying is institutional racism.
Oh yeah.
They're not denying racism. They're denying that there are institutions who have policies perpetuating racism.
But they're also and it's like, do you believe that white supremacy is just something Black people made up just to victimize themselves?
Wow.
Because some people do. Some people do. I've been watching
God.
this.
Tinfoil hat on,
No,
ladies
but
and
I-
gentlemen.
But I know it's brutal. And oh, sorry. Wait. America, you don't use the word black, do you?
Oh my God! Come
Do you,
on.
or do you say African American?
We're in Norway now.
No,
it's
they
okay.
say you can say black.
Oh, okay. Okay, but the thing is that some people believe that there is no thing called white supremacists, and that was illegal. That was illegal.
You're
Yeah.
impersonating now.
I don't know. What they did was legal. They were allowed to. So the black people, they have no right to be here. So,
Is that your American accent?
yeah.
Okay.
I don't know, but some people believe it's not true. So there are actually big denial on racism.
Well, a lot of people also don't think that climate change exists. So there's a lot of people who are.
There's a lot of people to take in this context.
Yeah.
They live a lot
I-
of people
But I
there.
feel like we'll see a lot
I've
of
never heard.
people-
I've actually myself never heard anyone deny that racism exists. But I've also never heard anyone give proof of institutional racism. Again, I'm not denying racism exists, but if you're going to claim institutional racism, then you better have some policies to point to.
Well, there is. It's quite hard. I just watched this documentary on. I don't know much about the American institutions, but
I mean, one
Yeah.
is the prison system. If we want
in the prison system,
Prison
Yeah.
system overwhelmingly imprisons men over women. Is it racist against men?
well,
Well,
you
What-
can't be.
If I
But-
can shoot in a good example here, because you have schools in America. A lot of them are based on local county tax, well, county municipality tax. Sorry, property taxes, for example. And poor neighborhoods in America are primarily African American because of
There are more white people in poverty than black people
Yeah, but
in the
that's-
United
But
States.
if
It's
you
not
look at the
because
places where
there's
they're
like
getting less
200
funding.
million white people in America, and there's 40 million black people.
Yes,
So-
but if you're going to compare poverty, compare it like in numbers, not in percentage of population.
Let me
It should be-
put it this way
But
then.
it should be in
it should be in
population.
percentage,
Should
not
it though?
numbers, because there's more
Should
white
it though?
than
Because
black.
isn't that just perpetuating race?
No, but
why,
if
why
you-
do we want to view these problems
Because it's
in the
wrong.
light of race? Because maybe the problems are happening not because of race, but they're happening because of other things.
But if you're discussing an issue of race and you see that like 50% of the black population is affected by something, well, like 10% of the white population is affected by something, like it matters because it's such a.
The example you're pointing towards is, for instance, incarceration of people.
I just threw those numbers were random.
Okay, but one of the examples with the narrative you're proposing is that black people are sentenced far more often to jail because of
Because of their
drug
past.
crimes, for instance.
Yeah, the war on drugs.
Yeah.
And I agree that's horrible. Shouldn't it be better to legalize marijuana, for instance?
We're working on it.
No, I think
but-
Let's
that's
have that debate
I
now.
think that statistic.
this
No,
was
but
hard.
seriously, I think that statistic. It might reflect racism. It probably does reflect racism, but if you're not honest enough to admit, it probably reflects some part of the war on drugs too.
But the
Then
war
we're
on
not
drugs is
being-
racist.
So yeah, so
Is it
what
though?
the
Is it?
theory
Yeah.
is, yeah, the
No,
theory
if
is,
you
No, no,
look,
wait,
I was
wait.
just
How is it
watching.
racist?
Okay, I need to remember. I literally was just
is it
talking
with
about
like
this
the
with
crack
people.
sale and the cocaine and
Yeah, it was like the way that people were like smoking crack or something. They were. I'm trying to remember exactly, but like if you. I watched like a 5-minute video and explained it all, and now I'm trying to remember. But basically, like the way that it was designed, like is just so obviously targeting like communities of color more so
yeah.
than white people, and like, and then also if you just
I understand your argument, but I would need proof.
Okay, so I will send the proof to you when you're home. But later when we take a beer, I'm going to show you the proof. But so the thing is that so when so drugs comes out in the market, the rich people afford the cocaine and the poor people afford the crack. And who are the poor people? Is the the African Americans
And the whites.
Yeah, but
There
the
are
poor
probably more white
there
people
are
buying
more-
drugs. So like
yeah,
Wait.
but they're targeted in a different way because
targeted
of the
against-
drugs that they're
yeah.
buying.
But then we get back to the point where
Let me talk.
Yeah, but
Let me talk. I'm not
no,
done.
but really, you can't say that they are targeting a certain population without giving proof.
But the
But
thing, I'm
let
just
me
bad at
talk.
remembering
Yeah,
statistics.
sorry. Okay, so what happens is that more people of the black community ends up using crack, and then the war on drugs begins, and they go and give like heavy straff.
Sentences?
Punishment.
Sentences.
Yeah. For people who use crack, and that's like, well, how? What about those who use cocaine? The rich white people. Why don't they get any like?
Can I just say something? I fundamentally believe in individual freedom. Do whatever drugs you want to do, and you shouldn't be punished for it, as long as it doesn't affect someone else.
But
That doesn't
That's-
change.
So I mean, what I mean with that is that we don't need the war on drugs.
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
exactly.
but-
I wish it didn't
And
happen.
maybe what you call racist statistics would disappear if we didn't have that corrupt war on drugs.
I agree with you, but I think the point that I was making is just the fact that you were saying, give an example of institutionalized racism, and you can see institutionalized, oh my god, institutionalized, I'm the one that speaks English, racism, like, within the prison system, and so that was just an example of, like, people...
But okay, I understand your claim, but if you're going to claim the prison system is institutionally racist, is it also sexist? Because it imprisons more men than women?
Well, it doesn't have to be sexist and racist.
No,
to be-
exactly. It doesn't have to be racist just because it incarcerates more black people than white
Well,
people.
the thing is that the
doesn't
reason
mean
why
that it's
you're put
racist.
in jail, there is like some special reasons to why you're put in jail, and it's always the African Americans who are like ends up in those situations where they have to go back in jail. And the worst part is that those who has been in jail. They cannot vote anymore. They cannot like be
And that's
active
very
in
bad.
the
I agree.
society.
That's
and
very
it's like-
bad.
And even like when they put on polls so people can start to vote, like in certain areas in the country, it's hard for people in like more remote areas to actually go and vote because it
Yeah.
is just too far away.
And what you're saying right there is what I find to be the best argument for institutional racism. When you
Yeah.
make it so you incentivize so that police would arrest black people so that they can't vote later. That's what I would consider the closest example of institutional
You
racism.
can also look to what Hilda, our teacher, was talking about in her presentation about the way that I forget which state it was, but how the districts were actually gerrymandered or like drawn out in a way that is unconstitutional because it's directly targeting communities of color and making it like impossible, like hard for people to vote with, or like Republicans will win, and then also directly. There was a quote that was saying something about how it was just like precise, drawn with precision to affect like these communities of color. But anyways, that those are the districts that are being voted in the
Yeah.
midterms, even though it's been declared unconstitutional.
Let me ask you guys a question. Is the United States fundamentally racist or fundamentally not racist?
Okay, I was actually thinking about it. Let's not forget that there were apartheid in the country. There were like after giving up on slavery, suddenly there was like, oh, there should be white and black schools. There should be white and black areas. So there is something implemented in their law.
But is it there today, though?
Well, it's not all gone, I don't
No.
think.
They're trying
Like,
to change.
but in legislature, is there anything there today?
Isn't it there? Doesn't they say that it's so hard to actually change the law that there's a lot of stupid laws still left? Like
I know
you're not
Texas has
allowed
some
to
real weird
sleep
laws.
with the duck or something. Yeah.
I'm sure there's some weird laws in Texas, but I
Real
think,
America.
but I
Real
think,
America.
I think the emancipation movements have done quite a good job in removing all legislation in the United States perpetuating racism.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just looking a lot about. Maybe I'm a conspiration theoretical person because I do love to watch a lot of different videos on YouTube, but it seems like there is. But it seems like there is the Constitution. It says one thing, but it could also be used for something else. So it's really you can really go around the law in America, isn't it? Or is that I don't know.
Wait,
I
what?
watch too many
Say that
YouTube
again.
videos.
For example, you could always find a gray zone in the Constitution to like, oh, this is why I didn't want Black Americans in this area or something. I don't know. Maybe now I'm bullshitting. You should listen to me.
I'm sure if you want to find a specific narrative, you can find it on all sides of the debate. I'm pretty sure of it.
Go ahead.
If I can shoot in here, especially when it comes to I'm no expert on this by all means, but I know for a fact that the reason you have really poor Black Americans have largely to do with well, I can argue in this way that after World War II, a lot of U.S. soldiers, white soldiers, were granted really favorable loans from with good loan rates from the government that caused white flight, especially from inner city areas, urban areas, that left poor black people. They didn't earn as much, couldn't pay as much local tax, which again ruined the school systems in those areas, which again perpetuated the problem, reinforced it, and created...
But what about all the other movements that have been aimed at reversing exactly that since the
and I'm
60s?
not saying, I'm saying you can argue this way. They were poor because of racism, but now they're poor because of poor.
Are they poor because of racism?
Black people in America?
Yeah.
In majority, yes.
Yeah.
Because of racism.
Well, yeah.
Because of slavery.
Well, no,
No?
I wouldn't say. Well, yeah, slavery started it.
These are very big claims that
that's-
they're poor because of racism.
No, I'm not saying the individual. I'm saying the majority of those who are poor can largely blame it on previous racist the previous racism.
I disagree. I
Okay, so
absolutely
what is your-
disagree.
What is
Okay.
your
I
claim?
think poverty. I think racism is an element, but to blame it on racism that
No,
their
I'm not saying
life
it's the
is.
main reason, but it's
It sounded like you did. Though.
okay. But
Yeah, I
let
think
me-
it's the main reason.
But
Yeah,
here's the
it's-
thing, though: are you a drug addict because you're poor and your life is miserable? So here's the thing: is
Or do you become one because your life is miserable?
exactly. So it's hard to really
Yeah.
pinpoint it. What's the reason? I'm just saying that's a big contributing factor. Is the
And
previous?
I agree. I'll concede that it can be a big contributing factor. But if you're going to claim that it's institutional, that it's the state behind it, or if like a state behind it, then you need some proof. I listen. I'm definitely not defending racism in the United States. I know there's a lot of racism in the United States, but I think the way to solve it is by educating people, by social movements, like the movements that are going on right now. I don't think the way to solve it is to make more legislation, making it easier for some groups over others, because you can do that argument to other groups too. Are Asians more privileged than white people, for instance? Should we help white people
Okay,
out?
we don't have
I also
time
want
for
to
this.
put in there
Like-
before we go. I'm not for affirmative action by any means. I just want to put that out there. But me and Andre largely agree on this.
We
have
seriously
certain
don't
points there.
have time
Yeah.
for this.
Alright.
This is a great episode, guys.
This has been the Skeptopod.
Shut up, Christian.
Shut him down.
Take his free speech away.